Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Lee and I'm a DIY electric skateboard builder, but occasionally, like really occasionally, I do review production boards that sort of take my interest, and today is one of those days. Yes, you've probably guessed it already by the title and the intro, it's the Propel X4S. Now, I have been lucky enough over the last 6 weeks to have a Propel X4S in my possession, thanks to the guys over at Pink Oak. If you don't know who they are and you're in the UK, go and check the guys at Pink Oak out. Really cool guys. They lent me this board on behalf of Propel, and I had it here for 6 weeks and had a great time on it. So with all that said, what is the Propel X4S? The Propel X4S is a 4-wheel drive, sort of custom built electric vehicle. That's the best way I can describe it. Over here we're used to doing off-road stuff, but still on something that kind of resembles a skateboard. It's actually a mountain board, but on this thing it's a purpose-built chassis for doing sort of extreme off-roading with sort of double wishbone suspension, independent suspension on each corner. It's absolutely something that's completely different to anything else I've ridden before, and over the course of this video I'm going to tell you about my experiences with it. So let's get straight into it. Now, the unboxing experience was absolutely fantastic. This is probably the best package board I've ever received. It was banded up with these huge banding straps. Once you've cut through them, loads of tape, get through the tape, more cardboard, foam. It was amazing. I remember pulling it out of the box and thinking this thing is an absolute monster. The wheels don't come attached and you've got to try and figure out how to do that yourself. In fact, Tim Wood, my colleague, also reviewed this board and he called me up and said, how do you put the wheels on? Because he wasn't too sure. The manual is a little bit vague in areas. It's pretty simple though. You put the wheel on, castellated nut and then a split pin through it. The suspension comes compressed, so you have these huge tie wraps on there. You have to cut the tie wraps and the suspension will burst out into its sort of fully resting position. Now, this can be quite scary and it's something you need to be prepared for. But once I'd unboxed it, it was on my desk and I was just looking at it thinking, oh my God, this thing is absolutely massive, but it's also, from an engineering point of view, pretty cool to look at. It looks purpose-built as a mean off-road machine, and I just really appreciated the way this looks. I think it looks really, really cool and different from almost everything that's out there. So I feel it's only right that we start talking about this board with the suspension. The suspension is completely unique to this board. I haven't seen anything else, or I haven't ridden anything else quite like it. Like I said earlier, double wishbones, independent suspension in each corner, gives this board some particular characteristics that I'm actually not used to. You might think this board looks completely over-engineered, because that's what I thought when I first rode it, but when you take it into the forest and take it over those roots and undulating terrain, that suspension makes a huge difference. You can just basically glide over all the roots and the sort of undulating, gnarly terrain with ease, really. The board handles rough ground super well because of that suspension system. The suspension system is super easy to adjust for your weight. There's a preload setting on the suspension strut. You can turn it by hand, couple of turns, and you can adjust it either way. From stock, I had to put a couple of turns on mine, and it was just right for my weight. You can tell when it's right because you can't really bottom the board out when you jump up and down on it. And yeah, the suspension is amazing. I was completely sold with this suspension. Let me tell you guys, it is fantastic. The manual does seem to suggest that you can adjust the shock absorbers, but I couldn't find a place on my board to adjust the shock absorbers. In general, the manual is pretty poor. I'm going to say that right now, and it's outdated. I think the guys over at Pink Oak were talking about rewriting the manual for the British market, and I think that would be a smart idea. And with that suspension wishbone system comes some unique steering characteristics. It kind of steers like a car, but at both ends, which makes this board super maneuverable. The thing is 27 kilos and it's an absolute monster, but when you're riding it, it's super agile thanks to that steering system. The steering system is also adjustable. You can have two separate setups for it. You can have there's like on the steering arms, there's an outer and an inner setting. I must admit, I was really happy with the way it came stock, so I never adjusted those. But you can have it set for like a more turny or more sort of stable, I guess, ride. You can have it asymmetrical as well, so you can have it more turny at the front and more stable at the back. This board is equipped with 4 6374 motors, meaning that each corner is driven, giving it that all-wheel drive setup. Now, because where the motors are positioned, it does mean that there is a motor pulley and it goes down to a sort of wheel pulley assembly and then along drive shafts to the wheels. Now, that's a lot of components to potentially go wrong. Over my testing period, and I probably did over 100 miles on this board, I never had any problems at all with any of those things. Everything seems to be built quite well, so I don't have any concerns in that area, but it's a super unique transmission system. The belts are hidden inside the chassis, so there's less chance for them to get sort of destroyed than there would be on a normal sort of board. So yeah, I was quite impressed with the power on this board. Having a motor in each corner translates to lots of traction, and obviously in addition to that, the strain on each motor is less. It's half than it would be on a normal board, which means all the motors run cooler and you can ride harder for longer. I never had any problems of overheating motors at all. The board had plenty of power. Don't know if you can tell how steep this is, but this is fairly steep, and I had Tom riding up it really slowly to try and get that idea of traction. Now, while I'm here, I do want to say a massive shout out to Tommy K, Tom Kilminster, Thomas B-Boy Stretch, as he's known on YouTube. Thank you very much for helping me shoot all the clips in this. It's not easy shooting videos on your own and getting those shots that you want to get, and obviously Tom is a bit of a decent rider as well, so when he came over, I accosted him to come and help me take some shots on the board, and yeah, he put on a bit of a show for you guys. So thank you very much, Tom. Go and check his channel out. I'll put a link in the description. Now, the ESCs in this board are two generic ESCs, two generic dual ESCs, but they're not connected at all, which is great from a reliability point of view, but it does mean that there are two switches to turn the board on. That might or might not be a problem for you. There is a roll to start, so if you only turn one side on and start moving, it will turn the other side on anyway, which is pretty good. I don't think you can tune these ESCs, so you're kind of left with what they're like from factory. It's not too bad, but I do have a couple of gripes with the way the ESC and the remote works together. Talking of the remote, this is the remote. You might recognize this from, if you're a DIY builder like me, you might recognize this from the Spint end. I think it's a Lingy remote. I'm not sure on that, but I believe so. And yes, although this is super comfortable in the hand, I think it is a bit of an awkward bit of kit with those ESCs, and I'll tell you why. On all of the controllers that we're used to using, the ones sort of based on Benjamin Vedder's designs, the accelerator and the brake control how much acceleration you have. Now, a slight increase on the accelerator, you can go top speed at that, but it's going to take you a long time to get there. Conversely, a large press, you're still going to go top speed, but it's going to get there a lot quicker. On the Propel, it's slightly different. A position on the thumb throttle will control the top speed, and the board will accelerate itself to that top speed depending on how much of this throttle you've got on, which is really odd. So if you just put a slight bit of throttle on, it'll probably do, I don't know, don't quote me on this, 10 miles an hour, and it'll accelerate itself to 10, a little bit more, it'll only go to 15, etc. Complete opposite way round to what we're used to, and it harps back to the old car ESCs, the old beast ESCs, the way those used to work as well. Ask me how I know. Fell off Mo's board the first time I ever rode it because of this. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Very, very odd. The other thing about the remote, and I'm going to turn it on to show you, is check this out. There's so much information on the screen, it's not really usable. It's a bit of information overload on there, and these buttons don't correspond to what they actually do. If you press the reverse button, it changes power mode. If you press the power button, it puts it into reverse. It's a little bit odd. It's kind of, this remote's kind of been accosted for use with this board, and as such, it doesn't really fit with the board exactly. The other thing I don't like about this, and the main reason why I'm not happy with this remote, is there is a huge deadband. Huge deadband. You know, you have to put quite a lot of movement on the throttle before it even does anything. You can get used to it, and I did find myself getting used to it, but yeah, it's not amazing. I'm not in love with this remote, guys, and I don't think you can change it, and it's the only thing about this board that I don't really like. But that said, you can get used to it, and I did get used to it, and I bet if you had this board for 500,000 miles, you wouldn't know any different anymore. So there is that. Talking about the remote though, check this out. Cycle Eagle. Now, Propel used to be called Cycle Eagle. They changed the name, but they kept the Cycle Eagle badge on the remote, they kept the Cycle Eagle badges on the board, and even the manual, which is a little bit of an oddity. Now, the battery pack in this thing is a 21 amp hour hot swappable battery pack, and I was quite impressed with the mechanism for doing this. All you have to do is press a button, slide the pack across, and it comes out. You disconnect two XT90s, I think it is, or XT60s, and then you can swap the battery over, plug those two cables back in, battery in, slide across, it clicks in, job done. Super stable, didn't have any issues with it. I think it's a really nice system. It means you can have an extra battery in your bag, although I will say the batteries are quite big. With this being a big board, four-wheel drive, they need to be quite juicy, so perhaps carrying a battery around on the group ride wouldn't be ideal. I was getting about 14 miles range on this thing, which is not phenomenal, but like I say, it is a big board, and it's not the sort of thing that you would ride to a group ride and then ride around the city. It's more for throw it in the back of your car, take it to somewhere where you're going to have fun on it, like in the woods or on a big common or a farm or whatever, and then throw it back in your car at the end of the day and drive home again. So it is kind of one of those boards. But yes, if you wanted to, you could have a spare battery, and Pink Oak do sell them, and if you're outside the UK, Propel also allow you to order the board with a spare battery. One thing I will say is you do not want to be pulling this thing home. It's 27 kilos, it's a beast. If you run out of battery in the middle of nowhere, you are screwed. So keep that in mind if you're going to get this board and you're going to be doing sort of semi-long rides. Now, the deck is a carbon fiber lollipop snowboard-esque style affair with some extreme concave. I was actually surprised how much concave there was on this deck, and at first I thought I wouldn't like it, but when you actually start riding it off-road, it totally makes sense. There's no bindings on this board as standard, although I wish there was, and not having bindings, you need that concave to lock in. If I own this board, the first thing I would be doing is I'd be putting a set of MBS F5s on this board. I think with a set of bindings, it would be amazing. But as it is, the deck does a good job of keeping you on the board. And if you're tall like me, you can have a nice wide stance, and that does make sense for riding this board in off-road sort of conditions. So all in all, what do I think of this board? Well, like I said at the start of the video, it's completely different to anything else I've ever ridden. So I was a little bit surprised to find that I actually really did enjoy riding it. Despite the remote and not having bindings and all that sort of stuff, I really thought this was super fun. I wouldn't own one personally. That's because I own a mountain board, and I feel like both of these things do the same job, but perhaps the mountain board does it a little bit better for me anyway. But I could totally see somebody owning this who lives next to a huge set of woods, or live on a massive farm and want to rag round. It's super powerful, it can go anywhere. It's great value for money as well. And thinking about that pricing, it is a lot of board for the money. If you are fancying off-road and you don't want to go the sort of typical electric mountain board route, then perhaps something like this would interest you. It's very similar to other offerings out there like the Baja, but I think that this is a great value board. I think there's a lot here for the money that you'd spend on it. And yeah, I think that if I owned it, the first thing I'd be doing is I'd be putting some bindings on, like I said, and then I'd probably look down the line to change the ESCs out and the remote for something else. And I think this board would be a weapon. I think if you bought this and did those mods, you'd still be quids in, and you'd have an absolute weapon of a board. So yes, I do enjoy this board. I do like it. I do recommend it for certain people. And I just want to say thank you very much for Pink Oak for giving me the opportunity to review this board and to talk about it. The guys at Pink Oak have been amazing. And yeah, go and check them out. If you're in the UK, they don't just do the Propel series, they also do other stuff. Like I think they sell one wheels and they sell other bits and pieces, and they've got more coming. And the guys are really, really nice. Some of the nicest guys I've worked with yet. So go and check them out, guys. And if you're not in the UK, then go and check out Propel boards. And that's about all we've got time for today. So I want to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Yeah. Oh no! I bet the selfie stick. Oh, can you get me out my bindings?